Mara Jensen never believed her life would one day circle back to the man who broke her in the most humiliating way possible. Yet there she was, standing beneath the blinding lights of Manhattan's Avery Tower, clutching the hands of her 3 toddlers, her breath shaking as the elevator climbed toward the floor where her past and her fate waited to strike. She hadn't stepped into a luxury building in years. The polished marble floors, the smell of expensive cologne lingering in the air, the quiet hum of wealth behind every glass wall, everything reminded her of the world she once belonged to, the world that spat her out the moment she became inconvenient. But she wasn't alone this time. Rylan Brooks walked beside her, steady as stone, the man who had carried her through all the nights her heart couldn't bear the weight anymore. He wasn't dressed like the billionaires upstairs. No designer suit, no gold cufflinks, just a clean shirt, rolled sleeves, and the softness of someone who'd earned every inch of his strength. Still, Mara's hands trembled, because on the other side of those elevator doors was Colton Avery, her ex-husband, the tech mogul who once vowed to love her, then abandoned her the moment he learned she was pregnant with triplets. Today, he thought she came here to beg. Today, he thought he still owned the story. Today, he thought he still owned her. But today, for the first time, Mara carried a truth powerful enough to shatter him. As the elevator dinged and the doors slid open, Colton's furious voice thundered across the hall, and what he saw made him freeze in a way no one had ever seen before. Mara Jensen wasn't born for a life of marble floors and penthouse windows. She came from a quiet suburb in Minnesota, raised by a mother who worked double shifts as a school cafeteria cook, and always reminded her that kindness was a currency no one could steal. Mara grew up soft-spoken, book-loving, the kind of girl who found comfort in organizing shelves at the local library after school. She never imagined her path would one day cross with a billionaire, much less that he would destroy every corner of the gentle world she came from. Before everything shattered, Mara worked as a library assistant, earning just enough to share a simple apartment with her mother. When her mother fell ill, Mara took on extra hours, shelving books until midnight, pushing through exhaustion with warm tea and quiet prayers that life would get easier. But life rarely grants such mercy. Her mother passed away when Mara was only 24, leaving her with grief that never fully healed. By the time she met Colton Avery during a reading event in Minneapolis, Mara was fragile but hopeful. He walked in with the aura of a man used to rooms bending toward him. Tailored suit, crisp smile, confidence that filled the air like expensive cologne. When he approached her table, asking about a book she was reading, Mara felt seen in a way she hadn't in years. He listened, or at least pretended to, nodding with perfect charm. It was easy to fall for a man like that. Too easy. Colton swept her into a world she'd only glimpsed in movies. Private dinners overlooking Chicago's skyline, weekends on business jets where she felt too stunned to even speak. He insisted she quit her job. No wife of mine should be working herself sick for pennies, he'd said, brushing a Mont Blanc pen across a contract he wanted her to sign. A prenup. At the time, it felt like love. Looking back, it was the first chain he clasped around her. Then came the pregnancy. 3 heartbeats. 3 miracles. Mara cried with joy. Colton froze like someone had slapped him. She didn't understand then, but she would soon. He didn't want children, not yet, not unless they benefited his carefully curated image. When reporters started whispering about his messy personal life, Colton snapped. His affection turned cold, his words grew sharp. And eventually, he left, vanishing into the world of flashing cameras while Mara faced the impossible alone. She delivered triplets prematurely, holding no one's hand. No family left, no husband, no money, just fear and love and 3 tiny babies who depended on her. She worked nights at an Amazon warehouse, hauling packages until her back throbbed, surviving on 3 hours of sleep and hope so small it barely flickered. People whispered she was weak, but they didn't know the fire she carried, a fire that would soon become the very force that brought a billionaire to his knees. The first time Mara stepped into Colton Avery's world, she felt like she was trespassing in a museum where everything was too polished, too expensive, too untouched by real life. Colton lived in a penthouse on the 62nd floor overlooking downtown Chicago. The kind of place that made people stop talking the moment they walked in. The glass walls looked out to a skyline glittering like diamonds. The leather couches smelled new, and the kitchen had appliances she didn't even know how to turn on. Colton watched her quietly as she stood frozen near the doorway that first night. "Get used to it," he said, almost gently. She tried. God, she tried. He bought her clothes she never asked for, set her up with an iPhone she barely knew how to use and insisted she sit beside him at every high-end dinner with investors. Dinners where conversations circled around stock movements, tech acquisitions, and offshore expansions. Mara would smile politely, sip sparkling water, and pretend she understood any of it. The truth was, she felt like a visitor who had wandered into a world built on codes she didn't have the manual for. Still, there were moments she thought happiness might grow here. Like the night he took her to a gala at the Plaza in Manhattan. She wore a borrowed silver dress. He upgraded at the last minute to something far more expensive. Colton looked proud that night, but Mara would later realize he wasn't proud of her, only of how she looked standing next to him. The cracks began showing long before the pregnancy. Subtle things. Colton correcting the way she spoke at dinner. Colton brushing off her worries about her mother's old belongings she kept in boxes. Colton insisting that their future children would be raised by nannies, trained properly. Colton scolding her for using coupons at a grocery store because Avery wives don't act like that. These weren't knives, not yet, just paper cuts. But paper cuts accumulate. When Mara found out she was pregnant, she rehearsed in her head how she would tell him. She pictured his smile, his lifted eyebrows, the warm hug. Instead, when she whispered, "It's triplets," Colton's face drained of all color. "3?" he muttered, as though it were a financial threat. She reached for his hand. He pulled away. That was the night she realized love alone couldn't soften a man made of stone. The more her belly grew, the more the penthouse felt like a cage. When reporters began speculating about Colton's unexpected family expansion, he started sleeping in a separate room. His assistant suggested containing the situation. Colton never corrected him. By the time Mara entered her third trimester, she could feel it. She didn't belong in his world. She never truly had, and soon she would be pushed out completely. The night everything shattered didn't begin with shouting. It began with silence, cold, heavy, unfamiliar. Mara was 7 months pregnant, carrying the weight of 3 tiny lives, when she noticed Colton's laptop open on the marble kitchen island. He never left his devices unattended. Ever. She only meant to close it. But one subject line froze her in place. Managing the PR problem, M. Her trembling finger clicked before her heart could stop her. Emails filled the screen. His publicist, his attorney, his board advisors, discussing her, the pregnancy, the unplanned expansion, and how it threatened a deal Colton had been negotiating for months. Someone suggested releasing a narrative that Mara had emotional instability. Another mentioned controlling the story before she gives birth. And Colton had replied with a single ice-cold line. "Handle it." The room spun. Mara felt the baby shift in her stomach, as if reacting to her fear. She swallowed the rising nausea and waited for him to come home, clutching the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned white. Rain hammered the windows that night, thunder growling across the skyline. When Colton finally walked in, drenched, irritated, wiping rain off his Rolex, Mara stepped forward with the laptop in her hands. "What is this?" she whispered. He glanced at the screen, then at her, and something dark flickered in his eyes. "You weren't supposed to see that." "That's your response?" "It's business, Mara. You wouldn't understand." She felt the crack inside her widen. "You called our children a PR problem. I called the situation a problem, and frankly, you made it worse." The argument escalated quickly, his voice sharp, hers trembling. "I'm carrying your children, Colton." "Children I didn't ask for," he snapped. The words sliced through her like a blade. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the coldness on his face. "You planned this," he hissed. "3 kids? Convenient for you." Her breath caught. "I didn't even know I was having triplets until the doctor told me." Colton didn't care. Control, his obsession, was slipping, and he needed someone to blame. When she begged him to attend the next prenatal appointment, he said, "I have a merger meeting. Priorities, Mara." Then came the final blow. He reached into a drawer, tossed a stack of papers on the island, a separation agreement, already prepared. Already signed by him. "You'll leave tomorrow," he said. "I'm not leaving my home." "This isn't your home. It never was." Her heart cracked open. Rain pounded harder, lightning slicing the sky like punishment. Colton grabbed an umbrella and stormed out into the raging storm without looking back, leaving Mara alone in the cavernous penthouse, 3 lives kicking inside her, and one brutal truth echoing in the thunder. She had just been abandoned by the man she once believed would protect her. The contractions started before sunrise, sharp and sudden, ripping Mara out of a shallow sleep on the cold penthouse couch. She had refused to leave that night, clutching her stomach, whispering to the babies that she would find a way. But at 4:12 a.m., the first jolt knocked the breath from her lungs. Her water broke minutes later, soaking the blanket she'd pulled over herself. Panic pierced through her chest. Triplets. 7 months. Too early. Too dangerous. Her first thought, against all reason, was Colton. She grabbed her phone and dialed him with shaking fingers. The call rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. She tried again, and again. Nothing. He had turned his phone off. A security guard, startled by her cries in the lobby, called an ambulance. By the time the EMTs lifted her onto the stretcher, Mara was sobbing, half from pain, half from terror. "Is your husband meeting us at the hospital?" one of them asked gently. She couldn't answer. She only turned her face toward the window as the ambulance sped through Chicago's rainy streets, sirens piercing the morning gloom. At the hospital, fluorescent lights blurred into streaks of white as nurses rushed her into the maternity ward. "Premature labor, possible fetal distress," someone shouted. A nurse squeezed Mara's shoulder. "Do you have family you want us to call?" "My mother." The realization hit her. She's gone. And the father? Mara's lips trembled. "He isn't coming." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Her delivery room felt too big, too bright, too empty. When the contractions intensified, she reached for a hand, any hand, but there was none. No partner, no parent, no friend. Just nurses moving in, practiced efficiency, faces blurring as tears filled her eyes. Baby A arrived first, a tiny fragile boy with a cry so soft it barely registered. Baby B followed minutes later, a girl struggling for breath, turning the room tense. Baby C came last, a boy who didn't cry at first, making Mara's heart stop until the nurse coaxed a thin whimper out of him. Each baby was whisked away to the NICU. She barely had time to touch their hands. Hours later, after surgery, exhaustion, and fear swallowing her whole, a hospital volunteer left a small bouquet on the bedside table. A white card was tucked inside. "Congratulations on the arrivals. CA." No signature, no visit, no warmth. Just 2 initials that felt like a punch to the chest. Mara pressed her palms to her face and cried, silent, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Not because she was weak, but because she had survived something no one should face alone. When she finally opened her eyes, the glass window reflected a woman she barely recognized. Tired, grieving, but alive. And somewhere inside her, a spark flickered. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, this darkest hour, was the beginning of a strength that would one day bring Colton Avery's entire empire crashing down. Mara left the hospital 10 days later with 3 infants barely the size of her forearm. The NICU nurses hugged her tightly, but even their kindness couldn't soften the reality waiting outside. She had nowhere to go except a cramped, damp 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, an emergency lease a social worker found after she confessed she couldn't return to the penthouse. The taxi driver helped her unload the donated car seats and 3 hospital bags. When the door shut behind her, the silence felt suffocating. The apartment smelled faintly of old carpet and winter air trapped too long behind swollen windows. She placed the babies, Noah, Lily, and Finn, into 3 mismatched second-hand cribs she'd found on Facebook Marketplace. For a moment, she stood there staring at them, her mind numb. 3 tiny chests rising and falling. 3 miracles needing her every second. And she was completely, utterly alone. That first week was a blur of exhaustion. Feedings every 2 hours, diapers that seemed endless. Finn's oxygen monitor beeping at 3 a.m. Lily struggling to latch no matter how Mara tried. Noah crying with colic until dawn. Her own body still recovering from the emergency C-section, every movement sending pain slicing down her abdomen. Bills piled on the counter, Hospital fees, formula costs, rent due in 10 days. She tried calling Colton's assistant to ask about temporary support. The woman responded with a rehearsed, icy line. Mr. Avery has no comment at this time. No comment. About his own children. On the fourth night, when all three babies were screaming and her phone buzzed with a past-due notice from the power company, Mara sank to the floor. She pressed her forehead to the peeling linoleum and sobbed. She cried so hard she couldn't breathe. She cried until she tasted salt and regret and fear all blended together. But even then, she didn't break. Not fully, because Finn's monitor beeped again and she forced herself up. After 3 months, her savings ran dry. She took a graveyard shift job at an Amazon warehouse, stacking boxes from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. A neighbor teenager watched the babies for a small fee. Mara stretched every dollar, choosing diapers over meals, skipping winter coats so the babies could have formula. She slept sitting up, often with a baby on her chest, her clothes stained with spit up and tears she never let herself shed until after midnight. She learned to live in 30-minute fragments between cries, alarms, and panic. Sometimes on the subway to work she'd see posters of Colton, magazine covers praising him as a visionary, a philanthropist, a man of integrity. She would stare at his smile, tight and polished, and whisper under her breath, "You left us, you left them." But life has a way of shifting when you least expect it. One freezing December night, after her shift ended, Mara trudged up the stairs to her apartment and found a stranger standing outside her door. A man with tired eyes and calloused hands. A man who would change everything. The hallway lights flickered as Mara climbed the last flight of stairs, her legs trembling from exhaustion. It was nearly 5 a.m. after a brutal warehouse shift, and all she wanted was to collapse beside the triplets and breathe for a moment. But when she turned the corner, she jolted to a stop. A man stood outside her apartment door, holding a small toolbox and a grocery bag. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his flannel shirt dusted with sawdust as if he had come straight from a workshop. His hair was messy, his eyes tired but gentle. He shifted when he noticed her. "You must be Mara," he said, voice low and warm. "I'm Rylan, your neighbor across the hall." Her heart thudded. She instinctively checked the apartment door, wondering if someone had broken in. "Is something wrong?" she asked, clutching her bag tighter. Rylan lifted the toolbox. "Heard your power flickering for days. I thought you might need help. And I heard the babies crying last night. Sounded like a rough one." Heat rushed to Mara's cheeks. Embarrassment, shame, exhaustion all blending together. "I didn't mean for the noise to bother anyone." He shook his head instantly. "No, I just figured you could use an extra pair of hands." He reached into the grocery bag and held out a pack of diapers and a container of formula. "I bought too much," he added awkwardly. But Mara could tell it wasn't true. He had bought it for her. For a moment she couldn't speak. Kindness had become such a rare thing in her life that she didn't know how to accept it. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I know," he replied softly, "but I'm here anyway." Inside the apartment, the babies started crying. Mara fumbled with her keys, hands shaking from fatigue. Rylan hesitated. "Do you want help carrying things in?" Something inside her, tired, bruised, desperate, finally cracked. "Yes," she breathed. "Please." He followed her inside, eyes widening at the cramped space, the mismatched cribs, the laundry piled in baskets, the faint medical beeps from Finn's monitor. But Rylan didn't show pity. He simply knelt beside the nearest crib and whispered, "Hey, little guy. Rough night?" To Mara's shock, Finn calmed. Lily stopped crying too, turning her gaze toward Rylan as if drawn to the sound of his voice. Noah blinked sleepily up at him. "You're good with kids," Mara murmured, surprised. He nodded once. "Used to volunteer at a community shelter." "And?" He paused, something flickering across his face. "I've lost people before. I know what it's like to need help." There it was. Something unspoken, a shadow in his eyes. As dawn crept through the broken blinds, Rylan fixed her fuse box, tightened her loose window latch, and cleaned a leak under her sink, all while Mara fed the babies. He worked quietly, like someone used to stepping into chaos and bringing order back one gentle piece at a time. Before leaving, he rested a hand on the doorway. "If you ever need anything, night or day, just knock." And for the first time since the triplets were born, Mara felt a fragile, trembling sense of hope rise in her chest. She had no idea that this man, This quiet stranger in a dusty flannel would one day stand between her and the billionaire who destroyed her life. It didn't happen overnight. It happened in the quiet hours between feedings, in the tiny space of Mara's worn-down apartment where exhaustion lived in every corner, but something warmer slowly grew beside it. After that first night, Rylan began stopping by just to check the wiring or drop off extra groceries he didn't need. But Mara knew he was really checking on them, her and the babies. One evening, Noah had been crying for almost an hour, his tiny face red and scrunched. Mara bounced him against her shoulder, whispering lullabies she barely remembered. Her back ached, her eyes burned. When a soft knock sounded at the door, she didn't even have the strength to answer. The door creaked open anyway. "Mara?" Rylan stepped inside, holding a small bag of tools. "I heard, oh." His voice softened as he saw her tears. "Here," he said gently, holding out his arms. She hesitated only a second before placing Noah in them. To her astonishment, Noah settled almost instantly, tucking his cheek against Rylan's chest. "You've got magic hands," she murmured. He smiled, a little shy. "Just practice." From that night on, he came by nearly every day. Sometimes after work, sometimes in the middle of the night when he heard the babies crying through the thin apartment walls. He built a wooden triple-high chair out of leftover planks from his workshop, sanded smooth until it gleamed. He fixed the broken heater the landlord kept postponing. He repaired a stroller wheel. He taught Mara how to swaddle Lily so she wouldn't wiggle free and kick off her socks. The triplets began recognizing him faster than anyone else. Noah would crawl to the door when he heard Rylan's footsteps. Lily's first giggle wasn't for Mara, it was for him when he made a silly face. Finn, the frailest of the three, relaxed most easily in Rylan's arms. One afternoon, as Rylan gently fed Finn from a bottle, Mara watched him from across the room. His brow furrowed in concentration, his touch cautious but confident. He wasn't pretending to help. He wasn't performing. He was simply there, present, steady, dependable. Everything she had begged Colton to be. "Why are you doing all this?" Mara finally asked. Rylan paused, the bottle still in hand. He didn't look at her right away. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything," he said quietly. "And because these kids deserve someone who shows up." The words sank deep. No man had ever said something so simple and meant it so completely. But there was something else she noticed, something that made her heart twist. Whenever she mentioned Colton, even in passing, a shadow crossed Rylan's face. She didn't understand it then. Not yet. Still, in the months that followed, Rylan became the constant gravity in their shifting world. Mara found herself smiling more, sleeping a little easier, standing straighter. The babies stopped being a burden she shouldered alone. They became a family, fragile but real. And though she didn't know it, the bond forming between them was already lighting a fuse that would one day explode right in Colton Avery's perfectly manicured world. Colton Avery had not thought about Mara or the triplets for almost a year, at least not in any way that carried responsibility. But when the glossy cover of a tech magazine labeled him America's coldest CEO, after rumors leaked about him abandoning his pregnant wife, everything changed. The board hated scandals. Investors panicked easily. Suddenly Colton's image, the thing he worshipped above all else, was slipping through his fingers. During a meeting inside Avery Tower, one of his PR strategists slid a tablet across the table. "Sir, public sentiment is shifting. You look heartless. That's not good for the IPO." Colton scoffed. "People forget." "Not this time," the strategist replied. "There's a thread online with photos of your kids. Thousands of comments. It's not flattering." Colton's jaw tightened. "My kids?" he repeated, as if the word offended him. "Yes, the triplets. People love underdog stories. They love a struggling mother. It makes you look heartless," another advisor finished. Colton's nostrils flared. He leaned back, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against the table in irritation. "So what's your brilliant plan?" "Reconnect," the strategist said. "Show you're a family man. Maybe a few staged photos. A charity appearance. Something warm." Colton's expression shifted, calculating, not emotional. "You want me to go play daddy," he muttered. "It could save millions." That night, for the first time since abandoning her, Colton called Mara. She nearly dropped her phone. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't ask about the baby's health. Instead, he said, "We need to meet. I have a proposal that benefits us both." Her stomach twisted. She knew him well enough to hear the manipulation in his tone. "Colton, I'm busy. The kids. Make time," he snapped. "You owe me that much." "Owe him?" She hung up before she said something she'd regret. But the calls kept coming. Emails, messages from his lawyers, a request to meet at a midtown law office. After weeks of pressure, Mara agreed, not because she wanted to, but because single mothers don't have the luxury of ignoring billionaires who control the legal system. Rylan insisted on going with her. "Just stay outside," she said nervously. "I'm not letting you face him alone," he replied. When she stepped into the conference room, Colton was already there, polished and smug, tapping his pen. He didn't hug her. He didn't ask about the children. Instead, he slid a folder across the table. "I need custody photos," he said, "and a few public appearances. In return, I'll increase support." Mara stared at him, stunned. "You want to use our children as props? It's mutually beneficial," he said. "Don't be dramatic." She closed the folder. "No." Colton's smile thinned. "You think you can afford to say no?" For the first time in months, Mara didn't shrink. Behind her, through the glass wall, she saw Rylan waiting, arms crossed, eyes firm, a reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. Colton didn't know it yet, but this refusal, this first small spark of defiance, was the beginning of a fire he would not be able to extinguish. The second meeting happened 2 weeks later, in a sleek midtown law office with floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look colder than ever. Mara sat at one end of a long mahogany table, exhaustion clinging to her like a second skin. She had slept maybe 3 hours the night before. The triplets had all caught the same fever. But she was here, because Colton wouldn't stop until she heard him out. He entered with the same swagger he used during board presentations. Perfect suit, perfect tie, perfect lie of a smile. "Mara," he said, as if her name were an inconvenience. "Let's make this simple." A lawyer placed a thick stack of papers in front of her, a contract full of clauses and conditions. Mara skimmed the first page and her stomach twisted into a hard knot. Colton leaned back. "This agreement protects everyone." "Everyone," Mara whispered. "Or just you?" Clause after clause was poison disguised as professionalism. She would receive a modest monthly support payment, but only if she agreed to allow Colton scheduled photo ops with the triplets, refrain from speaking publicly about their marriage, sign a confidentiality addendum about his past behavior, never introduce any unapproved male influence into the children's lives. Her pulse spiked. "Unapproved male influence?" she repeated. "What does that even mean?" Colton's jaw twitched. "It means I don't want random men near my kids." "They're not your props," she snapped. "They're my heirs," he shot back. "You think I'll let some handyman raise them?" Mara froze. Handyman. The word sliced like a blade. Kemet Rylan. "You don't even know your own children's middle names," she said, voice trembling but steady. "You've never changed a diaper. You didn't show up when Finn stopped breathing. And now you want to decide who can be around them?" Colton's mask slipped for a moment, revealing the coldness she remembered from their last fight in the penthouse. "You forget," he said quietly. "I have the power here." She pushed the contract back across the table. "You don't get to buy your way into their lives because your reputation is slipping." He laughed, a low, mocking sound. "Oh, Mara, you're tired. You're overwhelmed. You're not thinking clearly. Sign the agreement and everything gets easier. For you, for them, for everyone." She inhaled sharply. "The only reason things are hard is because you left us." The room fell silent. Colton nodded to his lawyer. "Explain her legal risks." The attorney began listing possibilities: reduced support, court battles, his ability to outspend her in every scenario. It was a familiar tactic: intimidation, polished and legal. Mara's throat tightened, but she didn't back down. Because behind the glass wall in the hallway, she could see Rylan waiting. Steady, patient, his gaze fixed on her like an anchor. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone reminded her she had survived worse than threats. She had survived abandonment, labor, poverty, and nights she thought would break her. Colton tapped the contract again. "Last chance." Mara rose from her chair. "No," she said. "That was your last chance." She walked toward the door, heart pounding, palms sweating, but free in a way she hadn't felt since the day he left her in that storm. Colton stared after her, not realizing the truth yet. This was the moment he lost the war, long before he ever realized one had begun. Mara had never stepped foot inside a legal aid clinic before. The place smelled faintly of old paper and burnt coffee, nothing like the sterile luxury of the law firms Colton used. She sat in a worn plastic chair, clutching a folder full of wrinkled documents, bills, medical records, old emails, everything she'd kept in a shoebox under her bed. Her hands trembled as she waited, wondering if she was foolish for even trying. A young attorney named Harper Lane finally called her name. Harper couldn't have been more than 30, but her sharp eyes missed nothing. She offered a warm smile, the kind that made Mara's throat tighten. "Let's see what we're working with," Harper said gently. Mara laid out every paper she had. As Harper skimmed through them, her smile faded, replaced by something far stronger. "Did Colton's team pressure you into signing anything?" "They tried," Mara whispered. "Did they provide consistent child support?" "No." "Did he visit the children at all?" "Never." Harper exhaled slowly, closing the folder. "Mara, you've been bullied. Intentionally." Mara blinked back tears. "I thought maybe I was just overwhelmed." "No," Harper said. "You were targeted. That's different." For the first time, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in years: validation. Harper began outlining her legal options: filing for formal support, documenting abandonment, petitioning for full custody, challenging Colton's threats. As each sentence felt like someone handing her bricks to rebuild the parts of herself she'd lost. "You'll need everything organized," Harper said. "Emails, receipts, medical visits, texts, anything that proves you raised the children alone." Mara nodded, determination curling in her chest. That night, she spread hundreds of papers across her small kitchen table. Rylan came over and silently pulled up a chair. "You don't have to stay," she murmured. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied. They spent hours sorting files. Rylan typed dates into a spreadsheet on Mara's old refurbished laptop, while she annotated timelines with color-coded sticky notes. Every fact they logged, every missed visit, every unpaid bill, felt like reclaiming a piece of truth Colton had stolen. Around midnight, Mara paused, staring at an old message from Colton. "You planned this," he had written. Her chest tightened. Rylan gently touched her wrist. "That was a lie," he said. He was scared of losing control. She looked up at him. "Why do you know so much about how he works?" A shadow crossed his expression. "Because he did something similar to me, years ago." Her breath caught. "What happened?" But Rylan only shook his head. "One day I'll tell you, when you're ready to hear it." The mystery lingered, but for now she didn't push. By the time dawn crept through the blinds, the timeline was complete. A mountain of evidence, painful, undeniable, sat neatly organized in folders. Harper emailed with one final instruction: be prepared. When powerful men feel cornered, they get reckless. Mara read the message twice. She wasn't the same terrified woman she'd been months ago. Not anymore. Because now she wasn't fighting alone. And soon, Colton Avery would learn that the woman he abandoned had become someone capable of burning his lies to the ground. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a fragile rhythm. Mara worked, cared for the triplets, organized documents for Harper, and tried to steady her nerves every time Colton's name appeared in her inbox. But something else was happening too. Something quieter, steadier. Rylan was rising in her life like dawn, gently, consistently, without demanding anything in return. One chilly morning, he knocked on her door before sunrise. "You should come see something," he said. Mara, bleary-eyed and holding Finn, frowned. "Rylan, it's 6 a.m. "I know," he chuckled, "but trust me." She dressed the babies, bundled them in blankets, and followed him outside. Parked in the street was a gently used Mercedes Sprinter van, clean, reliable, large enough for 3 car seats. "I bought it for work," he said quickly, scratching the back of his neck. "But it'll help us take the kids to doctor appointments." Us. The word made her chest warm. He had installed 3 car seats himself, each one cushioned and safe. When Mara stared at him, speechless, he shrugged. "I do things differently than him," he said. He didn't have to say who him was. That was the first hint she received, that Rylan's connection to Colton ran deeper than she realized. Still, he remained quiet about it. A week later, when Noah caught a high fever and the clinic was overbooked, Rylan rearranged his entire workday to drive them across Brooklyn. He stayed through the appointment, rocked Noah through each whimper, and carried him down the icy steps as if he were made of glass. The doctor smiled at him. "You the father?" Rylan hesitated. Before he could answer, Mara whispered, He's the one who shows up. And the doctor nodded, satisfied. That night, after the kids finally fell asleep, Mara found Rylan sitting at her tiny kitchen table, reading a message on his phone with a clenched jaw. "Everything okay?" she asked. He locked the screen instantly. "Too quickly," he said. "Just work stuff." But the shadow in his eyes told another story. Later, as he helped her wash bottles, she noticed a faded scar along his forearm, thin but deep. "What happened there?" Rylan rinsed a bottle, avoiding her gaze. "Avery Innovations happened." Her breath froze. He dried his hands slowly. "Colton didn't just fire me. He sabotaged my team. He stole the patent we built. He ruined my reputation so I couldn't work in our field again. I lost almost everything in one day." Mara's pulse quickened. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you deserved help without guilt, and because your struggle wasn't about me." Mara sank into a chair, absorbing the truth. Colton hadn't just thrown her away. He had a history of destroying anyone who threatened his ego. And now, slowly, all those broken pieces, hers, Rylan's, were aligning into a truth powerful enough to tear Colton's image apart. Rylan met her eyes. "I'm not going to let him hurt you again," he said softly. "Or those kids." For the first time in her life, Mara believed someone when they promised to stay. Neither of them knew it yet, but Rylan's past would soon become the very weapon that turned the entire war in Mara's favor. Snow fell softly over Manhattan the night the invitation arrived. A thick ivory envelope slipped under Mara's apartment door. She almost didn't open it. Bills and threats from Colton's lawyers were the only mail she expected. But when she tore the seal, her breath caught. Avery Innovations Charity Gala. The Plaza Hotel, Grand Ballroom. Formal attire required. Her name was printed on the RSVP, not Colton's, hers. At the bottom was a short line scrawled in his unmistakable handwriting: "Attendance is expected." Expected. Like she was part of his machinery again. Mara sank onto the couch, clutching the letter. She felt cornered. If she didn't go, Colton would spin the narrative as her being uncooperative. If she did go, she walked right into his world, his territory, where she had no power. When Rylan came by that evening, she handed him the letter. He read it once, jaw tightening. "He wants to parade you," Rylan said. "Make himself look good before the board." "I know. You're not going alone." She stared at him, startled. "Rylan, I can't drag you into this circus." He shook his head. "You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm walking there on my own 2 feet." Later that week, Harper confirmed it. "The board is watching him closely. If he looks unstable or loses public favor, they might push for leadership restructuring. He wants you there, smiling beside him." But Harper also smiled. "You can use that." And so Mara prepared. She didn't own a gown. She didn't have money for hair appointments or makeup artists. But her neighbor Rosa insisted she borrow a navy evening dress she had worn once, years ago, to her daughter's graduation dinner. Mara slipped into it, surprised to find it fit perfectly. Her reflection looked unfamiliar, older, stronger, worn but unbroken. Rylan arrived in a simple charcoal suit, nothing fancy, but on him it looked dignified. He held a tiny velvet pouch. "For the kids," he said. Inside were 3 small silver charms, one for each triplet, carved with their initials. Mara blinked back tears. "Rylan, they'll cherish these." "I hope so." The plaza glowed under crystal chandeliers as they stepped inside. Wealth clung to the air like perfume. Laughter, champagne, silk gowns, cameras. It was everything Mara had once been terrified of. But she wasn't shaking now. Not with Rylan beside her. Not with 3 children to defend. Not with truth gathering strength behind her like a storm. Across the room, Colton stood with executives, laughing too loudly, pretending not to notice her. But he did. The moment Mara entered, his expression cracked, the confident facade slipping for a fraction of a second. He wasn't expecting this version of her. He wasn't expecting Rylan at all. His eyes narrowed, jaw flexing. She felt the temperature shift. The gala was supposed to be his stage, but he had just realized she wasn't there to play the role he wrote for her. She was there to burn the script. The grand ballroom shimmered beneath gold chandeliers, but the air grew tight the moment Colton Avery locked eyes with Mara. His smile froze, stiff and brittle, like glass under pressure. Executives sensed the shift and subtly stepped aside, leaving a clear path between them. Mara felt her pulse drum against her ribs, but she didn't look away. She stood taller, Rylan's steady presence at her side like a silent shield. Colton approached with the confidence of a man who believed the world bent for him. "Mara," he said, voice dripping with false warmth, "you look presentable." The insult landed softly, but Mara didn't flinch. "Thank you," she replied coolly. "I came because you insisted." Colton's gaze flicked to Rylan. "And you brought a +1. Interesting." Rylan didn't respond. He didn't need to. His calm stare spoke louder than words. Colton sneered. "You really downgraded, Mara." A murmur rippled through nearby guests. Shock, discomfort, curiosity. Phones lifted subtly. Eyes watched. Colton didn't notice. He was too busy performing dominance. "You wanted a scene?" Mara whispered. "You're making one." "I'm saving you," he hissed. "Do you realize what this gala means? The board is here, investors are here, and you stroll in with—" "Me," Rylan cut in, voice low. "She walked in with me." Colton turned sharply. "Stay out of this." "No," Rylan said calmly. "I'm staying right here." Something ugly twisted in Colton's expression. He stepped closer, lowering his voice in a vicious whisper. "You think she cares about you? She's clinging to you because she has nothing else." Rylan didn't react, but Mara did. "That's enough," she said sharply. But Colton wasn't finished. He grabbed Mara's wrist, not hurting her, but enough to make her breath catch. "You will smile for photos," he said. "You will stand beside me tonight, and you will act like the perfect mother, or I'll make the custody battle unbearable." That was the moment the room shifted. Rylan stepped forward instantly. "Let go of her," Colton scoffed. "Or what?" He tightened his grip. A gasp traveled through the crowd. Mara pulled her wrist away, the movement small but defiant. "You don't own me," she said softly, but the softness held steel. "That's where you're wrong," Colton snapped. "Everything about this looks bad for you. Single mother, no money, no stability. You abandoned your children," Mara cut in. "That looks worse." His face flushed with anger. "You want to talk about abandonment? You planned that pregnancy." A voice behind them interrupted. "Mr. Avery," a board member said carefully, "people are watching." Colton turned, finally noticing the phones raised around the ballroom, people recording, people whispering, people seeing him, unfiltered, uncontrolled. He reached for Mara again, desperate to salvage the moment, but Rylan stepped between them. "Touch her again," he said quietly, "and see what happens." Colton's facade cracked completely, rage replacing charm. "You think you're a threat?" "No," Rylan replied. "I'm her choice." The words hit harder than any punch. Colton froze. The room held its breath. For the first time in his life, he looked like a man realizing he was losing something he could never buy back. And across the ballroom, a journalist lowered her phone, smiling. She had captured everything. It happened so fast, yet so clearly, that Mara would remember every second of it for the rest of her life. One moment, Colton Avery was towering over her in fury, demanding obedience like he always had. The next, every phone in the ballroom lifted a little higher, every whisper sharpened, every journalist's eyes gleamed with the thrill of a story unfolding right in front of them. Colton noticed too late. A reporter from a finance network stepped forward, microphone already on. "Mr. Avery," she said loudly, "is everything all right? You seem tense." Executives nearby stiffened. Investors watched with predatory interest. Someone at the champagne bar muttered, "This is bad, really bad." Colton straightened, forcing a smile. "Just a private disagreement," he said. "Nothing worth reporting." But the reporter wasn't fooled. "I captured your earlier comments," she replied. "Would you like to clarify them on record?" Colton's eyes flashed with panic, subtle but visible to anyone paying attention. His jaw ticked, his fingers twitched, he was unraveling. Mara stood silently watching him. For the first time she wasn't afraid. She didn't shrink, she didn't apologize. She simply existed, steady, unshaken, while his world began to tilt. Then a second reporter joined in. "Is it true you haven't visited your children since their birth?" A third added, "Sources say you refused child support for over a year. Can you confirm?" A fourth, "Are you leveraging your children to soften your public image before the IPO?" Colton's face drained of color. "This is inappropriate," he snapped. "Turn those off." But no one did. Rylan moved closer to Mara, just enough that she felt warmth at her back. Not possessive, protective. A quiet reminder, you're not alone. Colton swallowed hard, trying to regain control. "My ex-wife is exaggerating. She's emotional. She struggles with—" "Don't," Mara said quietly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the ballroom like a blade. He froze. She stepped forward, not toward him but past him into the small circle of reporters. "If I'm emotional," she said calmly, "it's because I raised 3 premature infants alone while their father changed phone numbers to avoid me. If I struggle, it's because I worked warehouse shifts at 2 a.m. while he told his PR team to call our children a problem." A collective gasp moved through the room. Colton opened his mouth, but she kept going. Her voice grew steadier with each word. "And tonight, he grabbed my wrist in public because I refused to let him use our children as props." The journalist holding the mic blinked. "Is that true, Mr. Avery?" Colton sputtered. "That, she's lying," Rylan provoked. "Funny," the journalist said, "because we have it on video." Every phone screen lit up. Someone pressed play. There he was, recorded from 3 angles, grabbing Mara, insulting Rylan, calling the triplets heirs, sneering about downgrades, threatening custody as leverage. The room went silent. Colton staggered back, face chalk white. Executives exchanged horrified glances. A board member whispered urgently into a phone. A PR director looked like she might faint. Then, from across the ballroom, someone said the words that detonated the night. "Is this the man you want leading a multi-billion-dollar company?" Colton's image collapsed in real time. And Mara watched it happen with the quiet strength of someone who had survived far worse than his rage. Behind her, Rylan gently touched her back. "You did good," he murmured. But Mara wasn't thinking about victory. She was thinking one simple truth. For the first time in years, Colton wasn't the one in control. And the fall had only just begun. The fallout from the Plaza Gala hit faster than anyone expected. By sunrise, 3 different videos of Colton's outburst had gone viral, one on a finance blog, one on TikTok, and one posted anonymously by someone inside the gala. Each clip showed him grabbing Mara's wrist, belittling her, mocking Rylan, and practically confessing to abandoning the triplets. The internet did not forgive him. By noon the next day, Mara received an unexpected call from Harper. "The board has summoned you," she said. "A formal review. They want your testimony." Mara's stomach twisted. "Me? Why?" "Because Colton is denying everything, and they no longer trust him." The review was to be held in a private conference room on the 78th floor of Avery Tower, one of the same floors Mara used to visit when she was Mrs. Avery, smiling politely at executives who never learned her name. Now she would return not as a silent ornament, but as a witness. Rylan insisted on driving her. "You sure you're ready?" he asked as they rode the elevator skyward. "No," she whispered, "but I'm going anyway." The doors opened to a room full of glass, steel, and intimidating power. The skyline stretched out behind the board members, each sitting rigidly, their faces carved with concern and calculation. Colton was already there, pale, tense, eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept. When he saw Rylan walk in behind Mara, something inside him snapped. "He doesn't belong here," Colton barked, pointing at Rylan. A board member cut in sharply. "Mr. Avery, this is a formal review. You are not conducting it." Colton bit back his rage, but the tremor in his jaw betrayed him. Harper motioned for Mara to sit. Her hands trembled as she opened her folder of documents. Every medical bill, every unanswered message, every piece of evidence she had spent months organizing. Rylan sat behind her, steady, silently promising she wasn't alone. "We want to understand the truth," the chairwoman said gently. "We've seen the footage, but we want your full statement." Mara inhaled, and then she told them everything. The night Colton walked out, the premature labor, the unanswered calls, the years of no support, the intimidation, the contract demanding photo ops and silence, the threats at the gala. Each word landed like a stone dropped in still water, sending ripples through the room. The board members exchanged dark looks. One of them pinched the bridge of his nose, another typed furiously into a tablet. Colton finally snapped. "She's lying. She planned that pregnancy, Rylan stood up. "That's enough." Colton wheeled toward him. "You don't get to speak," but a board member cut him off. "Mr. Avery, sit down before you dig the hole deeper." Silence fell. Then the chairwoman turned to Mara. "One final question," she said softly. "If you had to choose who acted as the father to your children, who would it be?" Mara felt the weight of the entire room pressing against her, but she didn't look at Colton. She looked at Rylan. "The man who was there," she said softly, "every night, every hospital visit, every moment." Rylan's breath caught. Colton's face collapsed, and in that single moment, the truth became undeniable. The board saw it. Colton felt it, Mara owned it, the empire had cracked, and the final break was coming. The boardroom was silent, suspended in a tension so sharp it felt like the air itself could snap. Outside the glass walls, Manhattan glittered in the afternoon light, cold, distant, indifferent. Inside, Colton Avery sat rigid, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on Mara, as if willing her to take back what she had just said. But she didn't. She held her ground. The chairwoman, "Thank you, Miss Jensen. Thank you, we appreciate your honesty." Then she turned to Colton. "Mr. Avery, do you have anything to say regarding these allegations?" Colton's mouth opened, but no words came out. Rage simmered in his eyes, boiling beneath the surface. He wasn't used to being questioned, much less cornered. For a man accustomed to commanding entire rooms with a glance, the loss of control was something he couldn't conceal. He pointed a shaking finger at Mara. "You're doing this because of him," he hissed, glaring at Rylan. "You think he's some hero? He's nobody. He's nothing." Rylan didn't move. He simply said, "The kids don't think so." The simple truth struck harder than any insult. Colton lunged to stand, but a board member's voice sliced through the air. "Sit down, Mr. Avery, now." It wasn't a request. Colton froze, humiliated, trembling, then slowly lowered himself back into his chair. Harper handed Mara a stack of printed emails, the ones where Colton's PR team called the Triplets a liability, suggested smearing Mara's mental health, and discussed fabricating stories to protect his image. The board took turns reading. Expression after expression shifted from concern to disappointment to disgust. One finally looked up. "Mr. Avery, this is indefensible." Colton's face flushed a deep red. "That's private correspondence. You have no right." "You involved your corporation in a personal attack," the chairwoman said sharply. "That makes it our business." Mara felt her heartbeat thrumming in her ears, a surreal mix of fear and vindication swirling inside her. She had never intended to destroy him, but he had left her no other path to survival. A board member turned to her gently. "You said earlier that you raised these children alone. Can you explain what support, if any, Mr. Avery provided?" Mara inhaled. "None." The word echoed. Rylan stepped forward then, not to argue but to hold out a folder of his own. Inside were pediatric appointment logs, receipts from formula he'd bought, emergency room records with his name listed as the Triplets' contact, and dozens of text messages where Mara begged for help while Colton ignored her. "Everything I have," Rylan said quietly, "I give freely. I never asked for credit." The board studied him with a mixture of respect and guilt. Guilt for ever believing Colton's curated image. Then the chairwoman said the words that shook the room. "Mr. Avery, is this the man who has acted as the children's father?" Colton's face twisted. "He's a fraud. I'm their biological. That's not what we asked." Her voice cut the air cleanly. "We asked who has shown up." Colton's throat tightened. His eyes darted to Mara, then to Rylan, then back to the board, like a trapped animal searching for a way out. There was none. His breath hitched. His hand gripped the table. His composure finally cracked open. For the first time in his adult life, the billionaire who believed he was untouchable looked small, fragile, beaten. "Mara," he whispered, voice breaking, "please, don't take them from me." She felt the sting of the plea, but not its sincerity, because he wasn't begging for his children. He was begging for control, for image, for ego. She stood slowly. "You already lost them," she said softly, "the day you walked away." Colton shut his eyes. And in that moment, in that single devastating moment, the man who thought he could never fall finally collapsed beneath the weight of his own choices. The boardroom felt colder when the deliberation began. Colton sat hunched forward, elbows on the polished table, fingers pressed into his temples as if trying to hold his world together by force. Mara watched him silently. There was no satisfaction in seeing him crumble, only the heavy, inevitable truth catching up to him. The board members stepped out for a private vote, leaving a silence so deep Mara could hear her own heartbeat. Rylan sat beside her, his hand resting near hers on the table, not touching but close enough to anchor her. Colton finally spoke. "You ruined me," he whispered, voice raw. Mara didn't look at him. "You ruined yourself." Minutes felt like hours until the doors opened and the board filed back in, expressions grim, resolute, professional in a way that left no space for mercy. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "Mr. Avery, the board has reached a decision." Colton straightened, gripping the edge of his seat. Effective immediately. You are suspended as CEO pending full investigation. Your voting power is frozen. Your access to company funds is restricted. A third-party ethics auditor will review all internal communications tied to your misconduct. Colton's face collapsed in disbelief. You can't do this. I built this company. The chairwoman didn't blink. And now you're the greatest threat to it. He surged to his feet, but two security officers stepped forward, not touching him, just standing close enough to remind him he had no authority left. Mara looked away. She didn't want to see his humiliation, but she couldn't unhear the sound he made, half snarl, half wounded animal. You think this is over? He spat at her. Mara met his eyes calmly. No, but this is the beginning. Harper rose from her chair, stacking documents. Next is custody and financial restitution, she said briskly. Miss Jensen will file for full legal custody and retroactive child support for the period of abandonment. Colton turned pale. Retroactive meant massive. Years of unpaid medical bills, childcare costs, and penalties. She's trying to bankrupt me. Harper didn't flinch. You abandoned 3 premature infants, Mr. Avery. The law assigns value to the damage you caused. One board member adjusted his glasses. We will also be issuing a public statement condemning your actions. The shareholders deserve transparency. Colton staggered back as if struck. His empire, his legacy, was disintegrating faster than he could breathe. Then came the final blow. The chairwoman looked at Mara with unexpected gentleness. Miss Jensen, considering the evidence, we formally support your custody petition. If you require a character witness, the board will provide one. Colton's knees buckled. Please, Mara, please. But she didn't move toward him. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't vindictive. She simply no longer needed to carry the weight of his choices. Security escorted him out as he shouted, I'll fight this! I'll fight all of you! The doors slammed, the echoes faded. Rylan exhaled slowly. You did it, he whispered. Mara felt tears sting her eyes, not of sorrow but release. No, she said softly, we did. Because this wasn't victory built on vengeance. It was justice, finally delivered to a man who believed the world owed him forgiveness he never earned. The days after the board's decision felt unreal, as if Mara were walking through a world made of smoke and sunlight. For years she had lived inside fear. Fear of bills, fear of court papers, fear of Colton's shadow stretching across her life like a storm cloud. But now, for the first time, the fear began to thin. Ryland showed up the morning after the hearing with a key in his hand. I want to show you something, he said, voice hesitant, almost shy. He drove her and the triplets across the Brooklyn Bridge, the skyline rising behind them like a reminder of what they had survived. Eventually, he parked in front of a narrow brownstone tucked between 2 tall trees. The building was worn but charming, brick glowing soft red, windows trimmed in white. Ryland stepped out and opened the back door to unbuckle Noah. I've been renovating it, he explained. For months. Figured someone would need it someday. Mara blinked. Someone? He glanced at her, then at the babies. Yeah, someone. He led them inside. Warm light pooled across the hardwood floors. The walls were freshly painted a soft cream. 3 tiny rooms upstairs held freshly built cribs, still unboxed. The kitchen smelled faintly of cedar and new beginnings. On the counter sat a small vase holding 3 daisies. A lump rose in Mara's throat. You did all this for us? For you, he corrected gently, and for them. But only if you want it. No pressure, no expectations. She walked through the space slowly, touching the smooth banister, the sunlit windows, the sturdy dining table he had sanded by hand. It didn't feel like a house. It felt like safety. Something she hadn't felt since her mother died. In the living room, Rylan knelt and let the triplets crawl around him. They laughed, full, happy sounds that filled the air like music. Noah tugged at Rylan's sleeve. Lily reached for his watch. Finn leaned against him with quiet trust. They love you, Mara whispered. Rylan looked up. I love them. Something inside her cracked open. Something tender, something terrified, something hopeful. They spent the afternoon assembling cribs, stacking diapers, and arranging a play area. Mara caught Rylan lifting Finn and spinning him gently, both laughing. She caught herself smiling too, really smiling. As evening fell, they sat on the stoop outside the brownstone. The babies slept in their carriers beside them. Streetlights flickered on. A warm breeze drifted down the block. This feels unreal, Mara said softly. It's real, Rylan replied. And it's yours, if you want it. Mara stared at him. the man who had walked into her life quietly and rebuilt every shattered piece with patience and care. "Why did you stay?" she asked. He took a breath, eyes soft. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything, and because I couldn't watch you fight alone." Their shoulders brushed, a touch small but electric. For the first time in years, Mara felt the future settle gently in her hands. Not something to fear, but something she could shape. This home, this moment, this man. They were the first true promise of a life she never thought she'd deserve. Spring settled softly over Brooklyn, brushing the brownstone-lined streets with sunlight and new leaves. For the first time in years, Mara felt each morning begin not with dread, but with quiet gratitude. The triplets woke to warm breakfasts, laughter echoed through the halls, and Rylan moved through the home like he'd always belonged there. The wounds of her past hadn't vanished, but they no longer defined her. Colton had vanished from her day-to-day life, swallowed by lawsuits, ethics investigations, and a tidal wave of public outrage. Harper kept her updated. His assets were frozen, his board seat revoked, and prosecutors were reviewing financial misconduct tied to the smear campaign against her. Justice worked slowly, but it was working. One crisp Saturday afternoon, Mara took the triplets to Prospect Park with Rylan. The children toddled across the grass, chasing bubbles Rylan blew into the breeze. Finn burst into giggles. Lily twirled. Noah clapped and followed the glimmering orbs like they were magic. Mara watched them with her hand pressed to her chest. "They're happy," she whispered. "They're safe," Rylan corrected gently. When the sun dipped low, they walked home. Rylan carried Lily, Noah held Mara's hand, and Finn dozed against Rylan's shoulder. It felt like a family. It was a family, even if no one had said it out loud. Inside the brownstone, Mara tucked the babies into their cribs. When she turned around, she found Rylan standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes soft as candlelight. "I want to talk to you," he said quietly. Her heart skipped. "About what?" "About us." He stepped closer, stopping just inches away. "Mara, when I first met you, I saw someone fighting alone. You shouldn't have had to, and I didn't stay because I pitied you. I stayed because you're strong and kind and brave, and because somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you." Her breath trembled. She hadn't expected those words, not from him, not after everything. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight," he said softly, "but I need you to know how I feel." She swallowed, emotion thickening her voice. "Rylan, you helped rebuild my life. I don't know how to even begin." He gently took her hand. "Begin with this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, hand-carved, imperfect, beautiful. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, just sincerity shaped into silver. "I'm not Colton," he whispered. "I can't give you penthouses or private jets, but I can promise you that you'll never face another storm alone, and that your kids will never wonder who loves them." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Rylan, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She didn't hesitate. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder, whispering the yes that had lived in her heart long before he ever asked. The children stirred softly behind them, as if sensing the shift. Rylan kissed her forehead, holding her as gently as the first night he fixed her fuse box. Outside, Brooklyn glowed under the streetlights, ordinary, imperfect, real. Mara Jensen finally had everything she once thought she'd lost. A home, a family, a man who stayed, and a future grounded not in fear, but in love earned through fire. Justice had come full circle, and so had she. So that's where the story closes for now. And if you're still here listening until this very moment, then something in this journey must have touched your heart in a way you maybe didn't expect. So let's breathe together for a second and look at this story from a gentler angle. What happened to Mara isn't just fiction. It's a reminder of something Marcus Aurelius once wrote. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Real strength lies in how you respond. Because life will break you. People will disappoint you. But healing begins the moment you choose not to let cruelty define your future. Mara found love again, not because she was lucky, but because she kept going. She fought for her children, she stood up to injustice, and she allowed herself to believe that kindness could return after loss. That is something every one of us can carry into our own lives. So if you're walking through something heavy right now, remember, storms don't last and you are allowed to rebuild. If this story meant something to you, even just a little, drop a like, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. We're in this together, friend.
Love is blind, but betrayal has 20/20 vision. Emma sat in the corner of the VIP booth, clutching a cheap anniversary card, while her husband Ethan poured vintage Dom Perignon for another woman right in front of her. He didn't just cheat, he laughed. He called Emma a bore, a placeholder, and a woman with zero future. He thought she was just a broke orphan he had graciously married. He didn't know that the phone in her pocket was connected to the CEO of Sterling Global, the very company that owned his career. And he certainly didn't know that the broke orphan was actually the sole heiress to a $40 billion empire. Ethan Caldwell was about to learn that you never mock the daughter of the devil unless you're ready to burn. The Crystal Chandelier at Le Jardin, New York's most exclusive French restaurant, cast a fracturing light over table 42. It was a table reserved for lovers tucked away in a velvet-draped alcove. Emma Caldwell sat alone. She checked her watch, a modest, leather-strapped analog piece that had seen better days. 8:15 p.m. Ethan was 45 minutes late. She smoothed the fabric of her dress. It wasn't designer. It was a soft, cream-colored dress she had bought off the rack at Macy's specifically for tonight, their 5th wedding anniversary. She had saved for 3 months to afford this dinner. Ethan's startup Nexus Tech was supposedly struggling, and she had been working double shifts at the library to keep their apartment afloat while he networked. "Madam," the waiter asked, his voice dripping with pity. "Would you like to order an appetizer while you wait?" "No, thank you," Emma said softly, offering a polite smile. "He's just busy. He'll be here." At 8:30 p.m., the heavy oak doors swung open. The restaurant went silent for a heartbeat. Ethan walked in. He looked magnificent in a bespoke charcoal suit, his hair gelled back with the arrogance of a man who believed the world owed him applause. But he wasn't alone. Hanging on his arm, wearing a red silk dress that cost more than Emma's annual salary, was Jessica Vance. Jessica was the VP of marketing at Ethan's firm, a woman Emma had been told not to worry about. A woman who was just one of the guys. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stood up halfway, her knees trembling. "Ethan!" Ethan didn't rush over. He didn't look guilty. He strolled toward the table with Jessica laughing at something he'd whispered, her hand resting possessively on his chest. "Sit down, Emma," Ethan said as they arrived. He didn't kiss her. He didn't say, "Happy anniversary." He pulled out a chair, not for Emma, but for Jessica. Jessica sat down, smoothing her red silk, and looked at Emma with a shark-like grin. "So this is the famous Emma. Ethan talks about you, occasionally." "Ethan, what is going on?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It's our anniversary." "I know what day it is," Ethan snapped, signaling the waiter. "Bottle of the 98 Cristal, and bring us sparkling water for my wife. She gets headaches with alcohol." He looked at Jessica and winked. Plus, she wouldn't know the difference between Cristal and sparkling cider anyway. Jessica let out a high, tinkling laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, stop it. You're terrible. Don't be mean to the help." She covered her mouth, feigning shock. "Oops. I mean the wife." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. The humiliation was physical, a sharp pain in her chest. "Why is she here, Ethan?" Ethan leaned back, swirling his empty glass. "Because, Emma, I needed a celebration that matched my status. Nexus Tech just landed the preliminary contract with the Sterling Global Group." Do you know what that means? It means I'm going to be rich. Filthy rich. He looked at Emma with cold, dead eyes. And let's be honest, babe. You're small time. Your coupon clipping and leftover pasta. Jessica is 5-star dining. She fits the life I'm stepping into. I supported you, Emma said, her voice shaking, but gaining a strange, cold edge. When you couldn't pay the server fees, I paid them. When you needed a suit for your first pitch, I sold my mother's locket. Ethan laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. And I appreciate the charity, really. But look at you. He gestured vaguely at her cream dress. You look like a school teacher from the Midwest. I need a queen, not a maid. Jessica reached across the table and stroked Ethan's hand. He's trying to say he's outgrown you, sweetie. It's natural. Survival of the fittest. Ethan pulled a velvet box from his pocket. Emma's breath hitched. Was this an apology? A twisted joke. He opened it. Inside sat a diamond bracelet, thick and glittering under the chandelier lights. He slid it across the table, onto Jessica's wrist. Happy promotion, Jess, Ethan purred. The restaurant was silent. People were staring. The waiter looked ready to pass out from second-hand embarrassment. Emma stared at the bracelet. Then she looked at Ethan. For the first time in 5 years, the fog of love lifted, and she saw him clearly. He wasn't ambitious. He was a parasite. He wasn't stressed. He was cruel. You're right, Ethan, Emma said. Her voice didn't shake this time. She picked up her purse. Right about what? Ethan smirked, sipping the champagne the waiter had just poured. That you're boring. That I don't fit into your life anymore, Emma said. She reached into her purse, pulled out a $20 bill, and placed it on the table. For the water. I wouldn't want to owe you anything. Walk away, Emma, Ethan called out, as she turned, his voice raising so the surrounding tables could hear. Go back to your little library books. Leave the business to the adults. Jessica giggled. Bye-bye, plain Jane. Emma walked out of Le Jardin, with her head high, her heels clicking a rhythmic beat on the marble floor. She didn't cry. Not yet. She pushed through the heavy doors into the cool New York night air. She walked half a block, turned the corner into a dark alleyway, and leaned against the brick wall. She took a deep breath, inhaling the city grit. Then she pulled out her phone. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 7 years. It rang once. Emma. A deep, gruff voice answered immediately. Daddy. Emma said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. You were right about him. There was a pause on the other end. A heavy, dangerous silence. Where are you? The voice asked. 5th and 58th. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Is he still breathing? For now, Emma said. But Daddy, I don't want you to just fire him. I want to burn his world down. Good, Arthur Sterling replied. I've been waiting for this day. 10 minutes later, a convoy of 3 black Cadillac Escalades screeched to a halt at the curb. Men in suits with earpieces spilled out, securing the perimeter as if the president were in town. The rear door of the middle car opened. Arthur Sterling stepped out. Arthur was 65, a titan of industry, whose net worth hovered around the GDP of a small country. He had built Sterling Global from a shipping company into a multinational conglomerate that owned everything from tech firms to pharmaceutical labs. He was known in the business world as the Hammer, because when he struck, nothing was left. He looked at his daughter. She looked small in her off-the-rack dress, but her eyes were identical to his steely grey and burning with intelligence. "Emma," he said, opening his arms. She stepped into his embrace, allowing herself a single moment of weakness. She buried her face in his cashmere coat. "I felt so stupid, Dad. He mocked me. He gave her a bracelet in front of me." Arthur's jaw tightened. "He's a dead man walking. He just doesn't know it yet." He ushered her into the car. The interior smelled of leather and expensive scotch. As the convoy pulled away, merging seamlessly into the traffic, Emma wiped her face with a handkerchief monogrammed with the letter S. "I want the file on Nexus Tech," Emma said, her sadness evaporating, replaced by cold calculation. Arthur handed her a tablet. "I had my team run a deep dive the moment you called. Ethan Caldwell, Nexus Tech. He thinks he just secured a partnership with our European division, Sterling Euro." "He mentioned that," Emma said, scrolling through the financial reports. "He was bragging about it to his mistress." "The deal isn't signed," Arthur said. "It's in the due diligence phase. The regional director, Marcus, was set to approve it on Monday." Emma looked at the numbers. "His liquidity is fake. Look at this. He's moving operational costs into marketing to hide losses. He's cooking the books, Dad." Arthur smiled a terrifying expression. "Amateur hour. I could crush him with a single phone call to the SEC. "No," Emma said sharply. She looked out the window at the passing city lights. "That's too fast. If he goes to jail now, he'll play the victim. He'll blame the market. He'll say he was just a startup guy trying to make it." She turned back to her father. "I want him to think he's won. I want him to climb so high that when he falls, he feels every inch of the drop." Arthur nodded, impressed. "What do you have in mind?" "The gala," Emma said. "The Sterling Global Annual Gala is next week. It's the event of the year. Everyone who is anyone will be there." "Yes, we are announcing the successor to the company," Arthur said, watching her closely. "Invite him," Emma said. "Invite Nexus Tech. Give him a VIP table. Make him believe he's being inducted into the inner circle. Let him bring Jessica. Let them strut around, thinking they own the place." "And you?" Arthur asked. "I'll be there," Emma said, "but not as Emma Caldwell, the librarian. I'll be there as Emma Sterling, the chairwoman of the board." Arthur poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to her. "He doesn't know. He never asked about my family after I told him my parents were out of the picture," Emma said, taking a sip. The burn felt good. "He was too self-absorbed to ask why I speak fluent French or why I know so much about contract law. He just thought I was a useful assistant." "He made the biggest mistake of his life," Arthur growled. "He mistook silence for weakness." The car pulled up to the Sterling estate, a sprawling mansion in upstate New York, far removed from the cramped apartment Emma had been paying for. As she walked up the grand staircase, flanked by servants she had known since childhood, Emma felt the persona of the struggling wife shedding like a dead skin. "Get me my design team," Emma told the head housekeeper, Martha. "And call the legal department. I need divorce papers drawn up, but don't serve them yet." "Yes, Miss Sterling," Martha said, looking relieved to see the heiress back. "And for the gala." Emma stopped at the top of the stairs. She looked down at the foyer where her father stood watching her with pride. "For the gala," Emma said, her eyes flashing. "I want a dress. Not cream, not white." "What color, miss?" "Red." Emma smiled darkly. "Blood red. And I want it to cost more than his entire company." Meanwhile, at the apartment, Ethan kicked the door open, laughing as he stumbled in with Jessica. They were drunk on expensive champagne and victory. "Did you see her face?" Jessica shrieked with laughter, kicking off her heels. "She looked like a kicked puppy." Ethan loosened his tie, throwing his jacket onto the couch Emma had bought. "She's dead weight, Jess. I'm finally free. With the Sterling deal, I'll be a multi-millionaire by Christmas. I can pay her a few grand in alimony, and she'll disappear." His phone buzzed. He pulled it out and squinted at the screen. It was an email. Subject: Official Invitation. Sterling Global Annual Gala. Ethan's eyes widened. He sobered up instantly. "No way." "What?" Jessica asked, nuzzling his neck. "It's an invite," Ethan whispered, awe in his voice. "From the main office. Arthur Sterling himself invited us to the annual gala. VIP access." Jessica squealed. "We made it. We actually made it." "This is it," Ethan said, looking around the shabby apartment with disdain. "We're moving out of this dump tomorrow. We're going to the top, Jess." He didn't notice that the picture frame on the mantelpiece, a photo of him and Emma from their wedding day, had fallen face down. He didn't notice, and he didn't care. He had no idea that the invitation wasn't a golden ticket. It was a summons to his execution. The morning sun hit the dirty windows of the apartment in Queens, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Ethan woke up with a pounding headache, the stale taste of expensive champagne and regret coating his tongue. He rolled over instinctively, reaching out. "Emma, water," he croaked, eyes still closed. His hand hit the cold, empty mattress. He blinked, sitting up. The apartment was silent. Usually by 7:00 a.m., the smell of brewing coffee and toast filled the small space. Emma would be ironing his shirt, humming softly, ensuring his life ran with invisible efficiency. Today there was nothing. "Emma," he called out, annoyance creeping into his voice. He stumbled out of bed, kicking a discarded high heel Jessica's that was lying in the hallway. He walked into the kitchen. The sink was full of dirty dishes from 2 days ago. The coffee pot was cold. He went to the bedroom closet. It was half empty. Her side, usually packed with her modest, sensible clothes, was bare. No note, no dramatic letter, just empty hangers rattling in the draft from the AC unit. "Childish," Ethan muttered, grabbing his phone. He saw 3 missed calls from his landlord about the rent, but he swiped them away. He dialed Emma. "The subscriber you are calling is not available." "Fine," he sneered at the phone. "Go cry to your friends. See if I care." He didn't know it, but Emma wasn't crying. 30 miles away in the north wing of the Sterling estate, Emma was standing before a floor-to-ceiling mirror. The woman reflecting back at her was unrecognizable from the person who had sat at table 42 the night before. 3 stylists hovered around her. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was being treated with oils and blown out into a sleek, dark cascade that framed her face like a shield. Arthur Sterling sat in a leather armchair behind her, watching with a grim satisfaction. Beside him stood Marcus Blackwood, the Director of Operations for Sterling Global, a man known in the industry as the Undertaker, because he buried companies that crossed the Sterlings. "The divorce papers are drafted," Marcus said, his voice smooth and low. "Do we serve him at his office?" Emma turned. She wasn't wearing the cream dress anymore. She was wearing a silk robe that whispered against the marble floor. Her eyes were cold. "No," Emma said. "Serving him now gives him a chance to prepare a defense. He'll try to hide assets. He'll try to play the victim in the press." She walked over to the table where a dossier on Nexus Tech lay open. She traced the financial charts with a manicured finger. "Ethan thinks he's a genius," Emma said softly. "He thinks he's outsmarted the market. I want him to believe he's won the lottery. I want him to sign the partnership agreement with Sterling Global before I serve him the papers." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because—" Emma looked at her father, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "The partnership agreement has a morality and integrity clause. Section 8. Paragraph 4. If the partner is found to have falsified data or engaged in unethical conduct, Sterling Global not only voids the contract, but has the right to seize the partner's intellectual property as collateral for damages." Marcus whistled low. "Ruthless. If he signs that, and then we reveal the accounting fraud—" "We own Nexus Tech," Emma finished, "and by extension we own him. I don't want half his money, Dad. I want his pride. I want him to work for me knowing he lost everything because he underestimated his wife." Arthur stood up and poured a cup of tea. "Marcus, go to Nexus Tech today. Play the fool. Flatter him. Make him feel like the king of New York. Get him to sign the preliminary intent." "With pleasure," Marcus said, adjusting his tie. Back at the Nexus Tech office, a trendy glass-walled space in Brooklyn that Ethan could barely afford. The mood was manic. Ethan strutted through the bullpen, Jessica trailing behind him. He clapped his hands. "Listen up, everyone," Ethan shouted. The 5 employees looked up, tired and overworked. "I don't want to see any slack today. We have a VIP coming from Sterling Global. If this goes well, we're all getting rich. If you mess it up, you're fired. Clear." Ethan, one of the developers, a young guy named Ben, raised his hand. "We still haven't fixed the server bug. If they check the back-end code—" "Hide it," Ethan snapped. "Put a patch over it." "I don't care. They aren't looking at code. They're looking at vision. And I am the vision." Jessica giggled, hanging on his arm. "You tell them, baby." At 11:00 a.m., Marcus Blackwood arrived. He didn't look like a tech guy. He looked like old money. He wore a 3-piece suit and carried a leather briefcase that looked older than the building. Ethan rushed forward, sweating slightly. "Mr. Blackwood, what an honor." "Mr. Caldwell," Marcus said, shaking his hand with a grip that was firm and dry. "Mr. Sterling sends his regards. He's heard interesting things about your company." "All good, I hope?" Ethan laughed nervously. "Extraordinary things." Marcus smiled, his eyes devoid of warmth. He looked at Jessica. "And this is Jessica Vance, VP of Marketing," Ethan said. "And my partner." "I see," Marcus said. "And Mrs. Caldwell, I understood she was involved in the administrative side." Ethan stiffened. "Emma. Oh no, she's taking a step back. Personal reasons. She couldn't handle the pressure of the big leagues." Jessica smirked. "She's more of a stay-at-home type. We're the power couple." Marcus nodded slowly, cataloguing every word to report back to Emma. "Very well. Let's look at the projections." For the next 2 hours, Ethan spun a web of lies. He showed inflated user numbers. He showed projected revenue based on contracts that didn't exist. He bragged, he boasted, and he preened. Marcus just nodded, taking notes. He wasn't checking the math. He was gathering evidence of fraud. "It all looks promising," Marcus said, finally closing his notebook. "I think we can expedite the signing to the night of the gala, a public signing on stage. Mr. Sterling loves a show." Ethan's eyes lit up. "On stage in front of everyone. Yes." Marcus lied smoothly. "It will be the highlight of the evening, the coronation of a new tech giant." Ethan looked at Jessica, his face flushed with triumph. He had done it. He had conned the biggest company in the world. "We'll be there," Ethan said. "Excellent," Marcus said. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Mr. Caldwell, make sure your tuxedo is sharp. The Sterlings value appearance above all else." As the door closed, Ethan grabbed Jessica and spun her around. "Did you hear that the coronation Emma said I was reckless? She said I was a dreamer." "Who's dreaming now, Emma?" He didn't know that in the back seat of Marcus's car, a recording device was being stopped, saving the file under Exhibit A, fraudulent misrepresentation. 3 days before the gala, the atmosphere in the Sterling estate was calm, contrasting sharply with the chaos of Ethan's life. Emma sat in the library surrounded by stacks of old legal books. She wasn't just relying on her lawyers. She was reading every contract herself. She wanted to know exactly how tight the noose was. Her phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. It was a text from her old friend, Sarah, one of the few people who knew her real identity, but had kept the secret for years. Sarah. "You won't believe who just walked into the Prada store on 5th Ave. Your ex and his upgrade." Emma picked up the phone. "Emma. What are they buying, Sarah? He's buying her a dress. Red, sequins, tacky, and he's trying to pay with 3 different credit cards." Emma smiled. She dialed the number for the Sterling Global Financial Department. "This is Emma," she said. "Regarding the Nexus account, authorize the credit increase. Let the transaction go through." "But Miss Sterling," the accountant replied, "their risk profile is critical." "I know," Emma said, her voice icy. "Let him spend. I want him to feel rich. I want him to max out every card he has. Let him buy the rope he'll hang himself with." "Understood, miss." Emma hung up and looked at the mannequin standing in the corner of the library. On it hung her dress for the gala. It was a masterpiece of design. A custom creation by Versace, but altered to her specifications. It was a deep blood-red velvet that seemed to absorb the light. It was elegant, regal, and dangerous. It had a high slit up the leg and a back that plunged dangerously low. It wasn't a dress for a wife. It was a dress for a widow. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Ethan was sweating at the register. "Try the Amex again," he snapped at the cashier. "Sir, it was declined," the cashier said politely. Jessica sighed loudly, looking at her nails. "Ethan, this is embarrassing." "Are we rich or not?" "We are rich," Ethan hissed. "It's just the bank's fraud protection triggered by high spending. It happens to millionaires all the time." Suddenly the machine beeped. Approved. "See," Ethan exhaled, grabbing the bag. "Just a glitch. Come on, Jess. Let's go get Celebrate. Caviar at the Ritz." They walked out onto 5th Avenue, the wind whipping Jessica's hair. Ethan felt invincible. He had the suit, the girl, and the deal. But as the sun began to set, a nagging feeling clawed at the back of his mind. Emma. She still hadn't called. It had been 4 days. No angry texts, no begging to come back. It was unnatural. Emma was dependent on him. She had no family. She had no money. Where was she sleeping? He pulled out his phone. He needed to make sure she didn't do something stupid like show up at the gala to make a scene. He couldn't have his boring ex-wife ruining his coronation. He dialed her number again. This time it rang. 1 ring. 2 rings. "Hello." The voice was Emma's, but it sounded different. It wasn't the soft, hesitant voice he was used to. It was clear, crisp, and echoing slightly as if she were in a large, empty room. "Emma," Ethan barked, putting on his authoritative husband voice. "Where the hell are you? Do you know how inconvenient this has been?" "Hello, Ethan," she replied. She sounded bored. "Don't hello Ethan me. I've been worried sick," he lied. "Look, I know you're hurting. I know you're jealous. But you need to sign the papers. I sent a PDF to your email." "I haven't checked my email," she said. "I've been busy." "Busy doing what, shelving books?" Ethan laughed cruelly. "Listen to me. Saturday night is the Sterling Gala. I am going to be on stage. It is the biggest night of my life." "I know," Emma said. "Good, so I am warning you." Ethan lowered his voice, glancing at Jessica, who was busy taking a selfie. "Do not come. Do not try to crash it. Security is tight and you don't have an invite. If you show up trying to cry or beg, I will have you thrown out. I don't want you embarrassing me." There was a long silence on the other end. Then a sound Ethan didn't expect. Emma laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a genuine, amused chuckle. "Oh, Ethan," she said, her voice dripping with a terrifying calmness. "You don't have to worry about me crashing the party." "Good," Ethan said, unsettled by her tone. "I won't be at the gate," Emma continued, "and I won't be crying. But Ethan, what? Make sure you smile for the cameras," she whispered. "History remembers the fall much better than the climb." Click. She hung up. Ethan stared at the phone. A chill ran down his spine despite the warm evening. "Crazy," he muttered, shaking it off. "She's just trying to scare me." He turned to Jessica, forcing a smile. "She's out of the picture. Let's go." The night of the gala. Saturday arrived with a storm. Rain lashed against the windows of the Plaza Hotel, where the Sterling Gala was being held in the grand ballroom. Limousines lined up for blocks. The paparazzi were out in force flashes, popping like lightning. Ethan and Jessica stepped out of their rented limo. Ethan adjusted his bow tie. Jessica smoothed her red sequin dress, which compared to the haute couture around them, looked a little too bright, a little too cheap. "Name?" the security guard at the VIP entrance asked, checking a clipboard. "Ethan Caldwell," Ethan said loudly, "CEO of Nexus Tech. I'm a guest of Arthur Sterling." The guard paused. He ran his finger down the list. He stopped. He looked up at Ethan, then at Jessica. A strange look crossed his face, something like pity. "Right this way, Mr. Caldwell," the guard said, unhooking the velvet rope. "You have a reserved table. Table 1. Table 1. Jessica grasped his arm. "Ethan." "That's the front. That's with the family." Ethan felt like he was floating. "I told you, Jess. I told you." They walked into the ballroom. It was a sea of gold crystal and old money. The air smelled of orchids and money. As they were escorted to the front, Ethan noticed something. People were looking at him, whispering. He assumed it was admiration. He waved slightly at a few people who quickly looked away. They reached table 1. It was right next to the stage. "Sit," Ethan commanded, pulling out a chair for Jessica. They sat down. The table was set for 4. 2 seats were empty. "Who do you think sits with us?" Jessica whispered. "Mr. Sterling. Maybe," Ethan said, pouring himself a glass of wine. "Or maybe the new partner." Suddenly the lights dimmed. The room went silent. A spotlight hit the stage. A voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of Sterling Global, Arthur Sterling." Applause thundered. Arthur walked out, looking regal and intimidating. He walked to the podium, gripping it with both hands. "Thank you," Arthur said. "Tonight is a night of new beginnings. Tonight we announce the future of this company. But first, Arthur's eyes scanned the room. They locked onto table 1. They locked onto Ethan. Ethan's heart swelled. This is it, he thought. He's going to call me up. First, Arthur continued, his voice dropping an octave, I want to introduce you to the person who has been quietly guiding our strategy for the last 5 years. The person who really runs this empire. My daughter, and the new chairwoman of the board. Ethan frowned. Daughter. I thought he had a son. Please welcome, Arthur shouted, gesturing to the top of the grand staircase. Emma Sterling. The music swelled. The spotlight swung to the top of the stairs. Ethan froze. The glass of wine slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. At the top of the stairs stood a woman. She was wearing a blood-red velvet dress that clung to her curves like liquid fire. She wore diamonds around her neck that cost more than Nexus tech. Her hair was sleek, her makeup sharp and fierce. It was Emma. His Emma. The woman who clipped coupons. The woman who made him pasta. She didn't look down at her feet. She looked straight ahead. She began to descend the stairs, every step a drumbeat of doom. The crowd applauded wildly. Jessica gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's your wife! Ethan couldn't breathe. He couldn't speak. He watched as Emma reached the bottom of the stairs. She walked through the crowd, the sea of people parting for her. She walked straight toward table 1. She didn't stop until she was standing right in front of Ethan, who was paralyzed in his chair. The room went quiet, sensing the tension. Emma looked down at him. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. She tilted her head slightly. Hello, Ethan, she said, her voice amplified by the microphone she was holding. I believe you're sitting in my seat. The silence at table 1 was heavy enough to crush bone. Ethan didn't move. He couldn't. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile the image of the woman standing before him. Radiant, powerful. Terrifying with the woman he had left crying in a dark apartment 4 days ago. I said, Emma repeated, her voice smooth as velvet, but sharp as a razor. You are in my seat. A waiter appeared out of the shadows, his face an impassive mask. He gently touched Ethan's shoulder. Sir, if you could slide 1 seat to the left. Ethan scrambled up his knees, knocking against the table leg, rattling the silverware. He moved down. Jessica, looking like a deer caught in headlights, scooted her chair away, creating a physical gap between her and Ethan. Emma sat. She didn't flop down. She descended into the chair with the grace of a queen, claiming a throne. She adjusted the diamond necklace at her throat, the gems catching the light and blinding Ethan. Emma. Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. I don't understand. Your dad. He's a mechanic. You told me he was a mechanic in Ohio. Emma turned her head slowly. She looked at him with an expression of mild curiosity, as if he were a bug she had found on her windshield. I told you my father fixed things that were broken, Emma said softly. I never said he was a mechanic, and I never said he lived in Ohio. You just assumed, Ethan. You assumed I came from nothing because it made you feel like you were something. Arthur Sterling leaned across the table. Up close, the billionaire smelled of cigars and absolute power. He ignored Ethan entirely and took Emma's hand. You look magnificent, darling, Arthur said. The board is terrified of you. It's wonderful. Thank you, Daddy. Emma smiled, a genuine smile, the one Ethan used to love, but now it felt like a weapon used against him. Mr. Sterling. Ethan interrupted, desperation clawing at his throat. He needed to salvage this. He needed to spin it. Sir, I had no idea. Emma never, we are married. This is wonderful news. We can keep the business in the family. He reached for Emma's hand. Right, babe. This changes everything. Nexus Tech and Sterling Global. We're a team. Emma looked down at his hand resting on hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, she picked up her dinner knife with her other hand. She twirled it idly, the blade flashing. It changes nothing, Ethan, she said. And it changes everything. Jessica, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. Her voice was shrill, trembling. Emma, Mrs. Caldwell, I just want you to know I'm just an employee. Ethan told me. He told me you were separated. Ethan whipped his head around to glare at Jessica, but Emma laughed. It was a low, dark sound. Oh, Jessica, Emma said, her eyes scanning the mistress's cheap sequin dress with pitiless precision. Don't worry. I don't blame the dog for eating the steak left on the floor. I blame the owner who dropped it. Jessica flushed a deep, blotchy crimson and looked down at her lap. The first course arrived lobster thermidor. Ethan felt bile rise in his throat. He looked around the room. Everyone was watching them. He saw the flashes of cameras. He saw the whispers behind manicured hands. They know, he thought. Do they know so? Emma said, slicing into her lobster. Marcus tells me you're eager to sign the partnership agreement tonight. Yes, Ethan said, latching on to the business talk like a drowning man to a life raft. Yes, the projections are solid. I'm ready. We're ready. Good, Emma said, chewing slowly. My father loves a public signing. It shows transparency. Transparency. Ethan echoed, sweat trickling down his back. Exactly. And you brought the final financial audits? She asked casually. Marcus has them, Ethan said. We went over everything. It's all clean. Emma stopped eating. She looked him dead in the eye. Are you sure, Ethan? Because once you sign that paper, there is no going back. You become part of Sterling Global, and we have strict standards. I'm sure, Ethan lied. He had to lie. If he admitted the fraud now, he lost everything. If he signed, he got the funding, and he could use the money to fix the books before anyone noticed. It was his only play. I've never been more sure of anything. Emma held his gaze for a long, agonizing second. Then she smiled. It was the smile of a wolf that had just heard the trap snap shut. Then let's make you a star, she whispered. The lights in the ballroom dimmed again. The spotlight returned to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed. We have a special surprise tonight. A historic partnership between Sterling Global and the rising star of the tech world, Nexus Tech. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Ethan Caldwell. Applause. It sounded loud, but to Ethan it sounded like the roar of an ocean before a tsunami. Go on, Emma said, gesturing to the stage. Don't keep your audience waiting. Ethan stood up. His legs felt like lead. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at Jessica, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. He looked at Emma. I'll make this right, he whispered to her. I'll make us billions. You'll see. Emma raised her glass of champagne in a mock toast. Break a leg, Ethan. He turned and walked toward the stairs. He forced a smile onto his face. He waved at the crowd. He was walking toward the brightest light in the room, unaware that he was walking directly into an incinerator. The stage was blindingly bright. The heat from the spotlights was intense, instantly making the sweat on Ethan's forehead glisten. In the center of the stage stood a glass podium. On it lay a thick document bound in leather, the partnership agreement. Beside it, a gold fountain pen. Standing next to the podium was Marcus Blackwood. The undertaker wasn't smiling. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking like a judge waiting to deliver a death sentence. Ethan walked up to the mic. He tapped it. Thump, thump. "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice echoing through the massive ballroom. He saw the thousands of faces in the dark. He saw table 1, front and center. Emma was watching him, her chin resting on her hand, looking like a spectator at a Roman Colosseum awaiting the lions. "This is a dream come true," Ethan continued, gaining a little confidence. The lie came easily now. "At Nexus Tech, we believe in the future. We believe in integrity. And with Sterling Global, we will change the world." He turned to Marcus. "Where do I sign?" Marcus gestured to the open page. "Right there, Mr. Caldwell, beside the seal." Ethan picked up the gold pen. It was heavy. He felt a moment of hesitation, a primal instinct screaming at him to run, but the greed was louder. The thought of the millions, the power, the validation. It silenced the warning. He pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. Ethan Caldwell. He signed it with a flourish. "Done." Ethan grinned, capping the pen. "We're partners." The room applauded politely. But the music didn't start. The lights didn't come up. Instead, the massive screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the Sterling Global logo, flickered. It turned black. Then a spreadsheet appeared. The crowd murmured. Ethan turned around, confused. "What is that? Is that part of the presentation?" He squinted. The text was huge. Nexus Tech. Internal ledger. Real versus investor ledger. Fabricated. Ethan's blood turned to ice. A second image appeared. It was an email chain. From Ethan Caldwell to head of accounting. Subject: hide the losses. Body: move the operational debt to the marketing budget. Sterling's people won't check deep enough. We just need the signature. Once the check clears, we patch the hole. A gasp ripped through the ballroom. It was a collective intake of breath from New York's elite. Ethan spun around to face Marcus. "Stop it! There's a mistake. Turn it off." Marcus stepped up to the microphone. He didn't shout. He spoke with a calm, deadly precision. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said, "at Sterling Global we take due diligence very seriously. Tonight was not a partnership ceremony. It was a public audit." Ethan grabbed the mic. "This is a lie. My wife, Emma, tell them." He pointed frantically at table 1. Emma stood up. She didn't need a microphone. She walked to the edge of the stage, looking up at him. The room fell deathly silent to hear her. "I am not your wife, Ethan," she said clearly. "I am the chairwoman of the company you just tried to defraud." Marcus continued reading from a tablet. "Mr. Caldwell, 5 minutes ago, you signed the partnership agreement. Section 8, paragraph 4, states that if the partner has knowingly provided false data, they forfeit all intellectual property and assets to Sterling Global as restitution for attempted corporate espionage and fraud." Marcus looked at Ethan. "You didn't just sign a partnership, Ethan. You signed a confession, and you signed over your company. Nexus Tech now belongs to us." "No." Ethan backed away, shaking his head. You can't. I'll sue you. With what money? Emma asked from the floor, her voice carrying. You maxed out your credit cards on a dress for your mistress. Speaking of... Ethan looked at table 1. Jessica was gone. Her chair was empty. She had fled the moment the email appeared on the screen. She left you, Ethan, Emma said. Just like you tried to leave me. But she was smarter. She ran before the police arrived. Police, Ethan squeaked. From the wings of the stage, 4 officers in NYPD uniforms emerged. They weren't the hotel security. They were the real deal. Ethan looked for an exit. The stage was too high to jump. The audience was a wall of judgment. Ethan Caldwell, one of the officers said, stepping into the spotlight. You are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny. Ethan felt the cold steel of handcuffs snap around his wrists. The wrists that had poured champagne for another woman just days ago. As they marched him across the stage, he looked down at Emma one last time. Why? He screamed, tears finally streaming down his face, ruining his makeup, ruining his facade. Why did you do it like this? Why didn't you just divorce me? Emma watched him, her face impassive, beautiful and terrible. Because Ethan, she said, her voice cutting through the sobbing of the man she once loved. You wanted a spectacle. You wanted to be big. You wanted everyone to know your name. She gestured to the thousands of people watching, to the cameras live streaming his arrest to the world. Now they do. She turned her back on him and sat down. Waiter, Emma said calmly, signaling the stunned staff. Please bring the champagne. We have a new acquisition to celebrate. As Ethan was dragged out the side exit, kicking and screaming, the orchestra began to play a waltz. Emma picked up her glass. Her father clinked his against hers. To the future, Arthur said. To the truth, Emma replied. She took a sip, the bubbles tasting like victory. But deep down beneath the diamonds and the velvet, a small part of her heart finally let go of the past, watching it get hauled away in the back of a squad car. She was free, and she was terrifying. 6 months later, the fluorescent lights of the visitation room at the Federal Correctional Institution in Otisville buzzed with a low, irritating hum. It was a stark contrast to the crystal chandeliers of Le Jardin, or the warm glow of the Sterling Gala. The air here smelled of bleach and despair. Emma sat on a metal stool, her posture perfect. She wasn't wearing the blood-red dress of the Avenger, nor the cream dress of the victim. She wore a sharp, navy blue power suit, tailored to within an inch of its life. On her wrist sat a Patek Philippe watch, simple understated, and worth more than the house she and Ethan used to rent. The heavy steel door buzzed open. Ethan shuffled in. The change was shocking. The man who had strutted into the restaurant 6 months ago demanding Cristal champagne was gone. In his place was a man who looked hollowed out. His once styled hair was buzzed short and graying at the temples. His bespoke suit was replaced by a drab, ill-fitting jumpsuit. His arrogance had been stripped away, leaving only a raw, nervous energy. He sat down opposite the glass partition. He picked up the phone. His hands were shaking. "Emma," he breathed. His voice was raspy. "You came." Emma picked up her receiver. "Hello, Ethan." "I knew you would come," Ethan said, a desperate light flickering in his eyes. "I knew you wouldn't leave me in here. It's all a misunderstanding, right? The lawyers, my public defender is an idiot, but you have the best lawyers. You can get me out." Emma watched him, her expression unreadable. It was fascinating in a morbid way to see how his delusion protected him. He still believed he was the main character of the story. "I didn't come to get you out, Ethan," Emma said calmly. "I came to close the account." She slid a manila envelope through the slot at the bottom of the glass. Ethan stared at it. "What is this, an appeal strategy?" "Divorce papers," Emma said. "And a non-disclosure agreement." Ethan recoiled as if slapped. "Divorce now." "Emma, I'm facing 10 years. For fraud. I didn't even commit well, not really. It was accounting tricks. Everyone does it. Not everyone gets caught trying to swindle their wife's father," Emma corrected him. "The DA has a mountain of evidence, Ethan. The emails you sent, the ones Marcus recovered, they prove you planned to embezzle the investment money to pay off personal debts. Debts you incurred trying to impress a woman who isn't even here visiting you." Ethan flinched. "Jessica, she'd testify against me. Did you know that to save her own skin, she told them everything? She said I forced her." "I know," Emma said. "I read the transcripts. She's working as a barista in Jersey City now. No reputable firm will hire her. Her name is flagged in every HR system in the tri-state area." "So you won." Ethan spat his sadness, turning to sudden impotent rage. "You destroyed us both. Are you happy? You sit there in your expensive suit playing the victim. But you lied to me too. You lied about who you were for 5 years. Emma leaned forward. The steel in her eyes hardened. "I never lied, Ethan. I omitted. And why? Because when we met, I wanted to be sure. I wanted to be loved for me, not for the sterling name. Not for the billions, and for a while. I thought you did love me." She paused, her voice softening just a fraction, showing the ghost of the pain she had overcome. "But you didn't love me, Ethan. You loved having a cheerleader. You loved having someone to cook and clean and pay the bills while you played CEO. And the moment you thought you found a better accessory, you tossed me aside like garbage." Ethan gripped the phone tight. "I made a mistake. One mistake. You humiliated me," Emma said. "You mocked me. You tried to erase me. This isn't about a mistake. It's about character. You are a small man, Ethan, and small men don't do well in big worlds." She tapped the glass near the envelope. "Sign the papers. If you do, I won't contest the division of our marital assets. You can keep the apartment furniture. You can keep the car once the police release it from impound. And if I don't sign," Ethan challenged, trying to find some leverage. Emma stood up. "Then my father's lawyers will bury you under so much litigation that by the time you get out of prison, you'll owe us money for the air you breathe." Ethan looked at her. He looked at the cold determination in her face. He realized, finally, that the doormat was gone. The wife was gone. The only thing left was the Titan. He pulled a cheap plastic pen from his pocket. He opened the envelope. He signed the document with a shaky hand. "Ethan Caldwell." He slid it back. "There," he whispered, defeated. "You're free." Emma took the envelope. She put it in her bag. "Goodbye, Ethan." "Wait," Ethan called out as she turned to leave. "Emma, do you hate me?" Emma stopped at the door. She looked back over her shoulder. "Hate takes energy, Ethan," she said. "And frankly, I don't think about you enough to hate you." She walked out. The final scene. The elevator doors opened onto the top floor of the Sterling Global Tower. The entire floor was open-concept, glass-walled and bustling with activity. Emma walked down the corridor. Heads turned. Employees nodded with respect, real respect, not the fear they had for her father, but admiration for the woman who had rooted out corruption and saved the company millions in a bad merger. She walked into the corner office. Arthur Sterling was there, standing by the window, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. "Done?" he asked, not turning around. "Done," Emma said, dropping her bag on the desk. She felt lighter. The final tether to her old life had been cut. Arthur turned. He looked older, tired, but proud. "The board voted this morning. They want you to take the lead on the European expansion. It means moving to Paris for a year." Emma walked to the window. She looked down at the city. Somewhere down there in the grid of streets was the restaurant where her heart had been broken. Somewhere down there was the apartment where she had cried. But from up here, everything looked small, manageable. "Paris," Emma mused. "I think I'd like that. Marcus is asking if we should release a statement about the divorce," Arthur said. "The press is still hungry for details." "No," Emma said firmly. "Let them starve. The story isn't about him anymore. It's about us. It's about what we build next." She turned to her father. "I don't want to be the scorned heiress in the tabloids, Dad. I want to be the CEO who doubled our stock price." Arthur smiled, clapping a hand on her shoulder. "That's my girl." Emma looked at her reflection in the glass. She saw the strength in her own jawline. She saw a woman who had walked through fire and come out refined like gold. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was the receipt from Le Jardin, the last thing she had kept from that night. She walked over to the shredder by her desk. She fed the paper into the machine. The whirring blades sliced the memory into confetti. She wasn't Emma Caldwell, the struggling wife. She wasn't even just Arthur Sterling's daughter. She was Emma Sterling, and she had work to do. "Let's get to work, Dad," she said. Arthur nodded and left the office. Emma sat in the executive chair. She spun it around to face the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, and yes, a touch of red. She smiled. It was going to be a beautiful tomorrow, and that, my friends, is how the Queen took her crown back. Ethan Caldwell learned the hard way that when you mistreat someone because you think they're weak, you might just be poking a sleeping lioness. He chased the glitter of gold and lost the diamond he had at home. Emma didn't just get revenge. She got justice, and more importantly, she found herself. It's a reminder to us all loyalty is rare. If you have someone who sticks by you when you have nothing, you treat them like royalty. Because you never know who they might really be or who they might become. What did you think of Emma's revenge? Was leaving him in prison too harsh, or did he get exactly what he deserved? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of drama, karma, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next story. We have a crazy tale coming up next week about a lottery winner who hid his ticket from his greedy family. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on your way up. They might be waiting for you on your way down. See you next time.